Welcome back to Business Daily on Trust TV. Now, before we left on that short break, we talked about the Nigerian budget. Now, let's delve into the situation. On Thursday, February 13, 2025, the Nigerian National Assembly approved the 2025 budget, setting total expenditures of 54.99 trillion naira, which is about 36 point something billion dollars. This figure surpasses the initial proposal of 54.2 trillion naira submitted by President Bola Tinubu earlier in February. Now, it is expected to be funded by a projected revenue of 36.35 trillion naira, leaving a deficit of 13.39 trillion. Now, that number I just mentioned is not for this new number, it's actually for the old 47.94 trillion naira that was proposed last year, December, that was dropped by our president at the National Assembly. The budget prioritizes security, infrastructure, education and healthcare, aiming to drive economic growth and social welfare improvements. There's so much we could go into. The key budget figures, total expenditure, projected revenue is 36.35 trillion naira. Budget deficit is 13.39 trillion, which is about 3.89% of the GDP. We have debt servicing at 14.32 trillion naira. Capital expenditure at 23.96 trillion naira, recurrent non-debt expenditure at 13.64 trillion naira, statutory transfers at 3.65 trillion naira, with a fiscal deficit to GDP ratio of 1.52%. There's been a special health allocation of $200 million to offset aid shortfalls from the U.S. budget priorities. As you're well aware, the President Trump has cut off some aid, and Nigeria, being a major beneficiary of this aid, had to do something about it in the budget. Now, defense and security, of course, always takes the large chunk of the budget at 4.91 trillion naira, infrastructure at 4.06 trillion naira, education at 3.5 trillion naira, health at 2.4 trillion naira. How are we going to fund this deficit? It's debt 69%, loans 28%, assets, sales 2%. I could go on, but I have people to join me to further discuss and give insights and better explain this whole numbers to us. And they're joining virtually. I have Dr Emmanuel Bashayi joining us from Abuja. He's a business consultant. And I equally have Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, a public affairs analyst and a political economist, both joining from Abuja. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on Business Daily today on Trust TV.
Good morning, Nigerians. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me, Chiamaka.
Maybe we could try to unmute our audio so that we could hear. I can't seem.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Okay, so now you've heard me reel out all those numbers about the budget, 2025 budget. I'll start with you, Dr. Emmanuel Bashayi. This budget and the key priorities of it, how would it impact businesses and the economy? We know that they said that this is the budget of restoration. Is it really going to restore?
Thank you very much, Chiamaka, for that question. The budget of restoration, is it going to restore? That will be the key question on the minds of many Nigerians. Because in the strict sense of it, whenever people hear about budgets and all, the key thing they want to feel is, how does this make my life better? All right? And this is the question on the lips of many Nigerians. Is it going to restore? Restore what? Is it going to restore my livelihood? Is it going to make my life as good as it was 2-3 years ago? Is it going to restore my standard of living? What exactly is it going to restore is the question that most Nigerians are going to be asking behind this budget. And let me be very, very frank, most Nigerians don't read these budgets. The only way they read this budget is how has their lives been made better or worse than it was before now. All right. So this will be the key thing that we want to unravel. We want to give Nigerians the sense that this budget, based on its breakdown today, has shown some will share. I mean, is showing promise that it's going to restore your life to possibly pre uh, uh, pre the time that it has gone bad and what it is today. So for me, this will be my comment on this at this moment. The details, of course, we'll go through it when you think about, as for example, budget on security, for example, at a 6.57, which is about times what it was in 2024. The question would be, would people feel twice more secure than they were last year? Now, that is the only way Nigerians would understand that this budget is actually a better budget and has an interest to restore their livelihoods than what it was, and so on and so forth. So when they compare what you're budgeting now versus what it was before, the key question would be, how does this better my life?
All right. Dr. Abu Hamisu, what's your take?
Well, thank you so very much. I have a problem when it comes to Nigerian budget because a budget is supposed to be the life wire of every country, every government that is serious about transforming the lives of the people. And therefore, when you mention budget, you're not talking about the luxuries of those that are ruling a country. You're talking about protecting the lives and properties, especially driving the well-being of the people by creating an enable environment in terms of infrastructure. So the health of every nation could be analyzed from the budget of that nation. That we have that humongous budget deficit tells us that our liabilities are more than our asset as a nation, and that we are consuming more than we are producing, and that in the long run, it is not sustainable. And if you look at the budget, when you go to the details and the breakdowns and everything, you come to see a pattern that has not changed. I think the framers of Nigeria budget can do better. What I know about budget in other countries of the world, when they say it's a budget of restoration, you'd have seen the indices, the pillars that will show you that truly it's a budget of restoration or budget of consolidation. I give an instance. When Buhari was around, there was something that was being done, which was ease of doing business. And this ease of doing business was aggregation of all that needed to be done in order to facilitate our business all to be done. And then you have CAC doing its own bid. You have Ministry of Works and Housing constructing roads all over the Federation, enhancing the laws and frameworks for governance and interactions. So this budget, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see it as the budget of restoration they're talking about. I see it as a correlation of how government money will be spent and how they want to spend it. And I do not see the linkages, either linking education to industries or industries to consumers or consumers to industries, or the forward and backward linkages that transform the economy. So that was what happened with the last budget. That is what has been happening in this country, where the framers of budget will just sit and allocate figures without any concrete evidence. If you tell me that you are linking, that the budget of restoration is going to link the whole Nigeria in a sort of relationship that will promote trade, that will promote earnings, that will enhance the capacity of the informal sector to contribute to the economy, then I would quite agree that it's a budget of restoration. But if it is just a normal proration of 54.99 billion between agencies of government as usual, and then we don't have a review, then there is a problem. We can give it whatever we want to give it, but it will not change anything on the ground.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the fiscal deficit. That's the 13, rather the deficit in the budget. That's the 13, over 13 point something trillion naira deficit. Now, we're going to go with the new number of 54.99, which is going to increase that actually by, let's say, maybe make it 15 point something trillion naira. possibly.
Yes.
Are we, because if you notice, we're going to be going to debts and loans to be able to fund this deficit. So is it safe to say, are we borrowing responsibly?
Yes.
Or are we heading towards a debt crisis?
You see, in as much as we don't address some fundamentals, we are going to have a lot of problems in our hands, and we continue to eat into the future of our children and grandchildren. That is exactly what we are doing. And bad economists among us will tell us that debt is not bad, provided it's sustainable. What is sustainability about debt? Even as a person, we are running away from debt, not to talk about nation. And you know how debt is used to take away the independence of nations so that they are not able to assert themselves. And Nigeria in the 1950s and 60s were borrowing Britain money, supporting Britain, and you see conferences about how Nigeria will be able to support Britain. All over Africa, Nigeria was supporting liberation movement. What that tells us was that Nigeria was earning more than it needs so that it can be able to do a lot of things outside. But today, Nigeria is grossly not able to meet its own obligations, not to talk much more of assisting others. And that is why you see that our influence has win in sub-Saharan Africa. So what I'm saying in essence is we cannot consistently have a budget that is built on budget deficit that we are borrowing from IMF. Since President Ahmed Bola Tinubu came on board, he has taken more than 5 loans from the IMF, and you know the implication of IMF loan on every country. And we have the resources, we have the people, we have the land, we have everything. What is happening is simple. Our budget is outwardly oriented, and that is why we're having this deficit and having to take loan. In the 60s, in the 70s, Nigeria was producing agricultural products, and Nigeria was able to meet its obligation. Now, what we've not been able to do is to transition, and we abandon agriculture. We want to build blue chips economy, blue economy, red economy, yellow economy, and our universities are not producing the requisite number of persons, skills, competencies that could drive this economy. We are not able to equally do well in agriculture. We are not able to do well in commerce. Up to today, I see our budget as our budget their monies, because when you pick Nigerian budget, even this infrastructure that we are talking about, go and check it out. At the end of it all, let us come and do the analysis. Let us see the indigenous companies that are giving infrastructure to handle. It is always from Julius Berger to Chinese CCECC, and then all of these companies will repatriate their monies out of this country. So what I'm saying in essence is we need to take measures to ensure that this deficit is not it's not borrowed fund. Okay. That we should reform our educational sector so that the Ministry of Science and Technology can produce engineers that can build roads. That is exactly what the Chinese are doing. That is exactly what the Iranians are doing. They are not borrowing money from anywhere. They are relying on themselves. And so the era of Nigeria having to spend, because look, my sister, let me not just deceive you. If you want to develop, 2 things are involved. It's either you develop the 3 things are involved. It's either you develop the technology, or you steal this technology, or you pay for this technology. Nigeria has been paying for technology to the extent that we are now going bankrupt. We are now into a serious deficit, and then Nigeria is not willing to develop our own capacity so that we can create our own technology, use it, and export it. If we cannot do that, the Chinese came up with Huawei because of issues around patent and whatever. Okay. But today they beat Apple, you know. So this is what we are saying. Let us look inward.
Okay, Dr. Hamisu, I know you have a lot to say. We'll come back to you. Let me get back to Dr. Bashayi. You are a business consultant, and we can see that for most of the funding is a lot of tax, and I'm sure you're aware in the last, let's say, in the last few months or so, there's been a lot of tax increments. Even just last week, the NPA went 15% increment, citing that it's been over 3 decades. They've not had to increase their NPA ports levy, but they've gone 15%. Now, as a business consultant, tell me, how will this tax revenue affect businesses by the potential tax increases that would come?
So straightforward, simple answer. It's going to directly impact on businesses because this increase in tax is going to be passed directly to the consumer. So buckle up your seatbelts. That is going to also impact inflation because the price of goods and services go up. Remember, Nigeria is an import-dependent country, so that will be the first response, the first reaction. Now, when you look at it with respect to the budget, where we're increasing taxes from left, right, and center to be able to fund the budget, it simply tells you one thing, that we are milking an already distressed populace. We're milking an already distressed economy. So it's going to slide it further into more distress because the economy is it's already going through a lot. The consumer is already going through a lot. So with all these subtle taxes from bank charges of ATM withdrawals to other smaller subtle taxes that have been smuggled into our day-to-day lives, somehow Nigerians are resilient, kind of accommodated. But remember, at the end of the day, it's still coming out of the same pocket, and we shouldn't be surprised when inflation numbers never get abated. Okay, so that is one. To speak to the budget directly, I would have expected that. I give you this as an example, and I want to speak to Nigerians as simply as possible. There's no grammar. There's no need to talk plenty English and grammar. I try to put it as simply as it can possibly be so that the layman on the street understands. If your salary used to be 100K, 100,000 naira, and now you earn 40,000 naira, and you want to maintain the same lifestyle you used to live when you were earning 100,000, without putting into consideration your current reality, one of the two things will happen. Is either you borrow a lot or you cut down on your expenditure to meet your current income. So what I have seen consistently being demonstrated is that our government have not woken up to the reality that the chips are down. We earn less as a country, we have more debt to service and all, but yet there is no demonstration, even in our budgets, to show that these people realize the situation that we're in and they are cutting down deliberately on their expenditure to meet our current reality. That is why we keep borrowing and borrowing, because we need to maintain the same standard of life we had when things were better. So this is the situation. And until we get to that point where we are cutting down on our expenditure to meet the size of our material, like they say, cut your coat according to your cloth. Cut your coat according to your cloth. The material, the quantity of material you have determines how bogus the cloth should be. Until we get to that point, we will continue to borrow. And the implication is this. Fancy economists will tell us debt to GDP ratio and all. Excuse me, GDP is not even like money sitting down somewhere. It's an estimation of the productivity of a country. So if you base your argument on GDP, you're not basing it on like a real number. You're basing it on an estimation. I would have expected that we should rather be basing our debt to revenue instead. I'm making 10 naira. How much am I going to service this debt based on what I earn? This, I feel, is a more objective measure of reality than just thinking about debt to GDP and all of that. The GDP that cannot increase because you're stifling the economy every day, you're stifling the real sector with taxes, you're stifling the real sector with unease. So how will the GDP grow for you to be able to have a bigger GDP to benchmark your borrowing versus? So the truth there is this. We need to take a step back as a nation and understand the reality that we're in. Things are not the same as they were 10 years ago. And we need to wake up to that reality and begin to see it in government spending, see it in the way our public officers conduct their lives. It has not changed. Nothing looks different from the way they do their stuff. The masses have been made to buckle up, to tighten their seatbelts, but there is nothing that shows that the people who are the managers of this economy are making similar adjustments. That is where the problem is.
Okay.
I saw an additional 5 trillion naira in expenditure because we saw a window that we could make more money. So we increased the expenditure. Why wouldn't we just reduce the debt from 13 trillion to somewhere lower? Thank you.
So, Doctor, now you've brought that, because I was equally wondering. So the fact that we might make more money, does that mean we have to increase the budget? Because we're not even sure. We are expecting to make this. It's not like if we're sure we're going to make this something trillion naira.
So let's assume we're going to make it for sure, right? So my question would then be, if you are having a debt deficit, a budget deficit of 13 trillion, and then of the, let's say, just take an example, a salary earner just suddenly got to know that he's going to get a bonus of 5,000 naira, and he's already going to run his affairs for the month on 13,000 naira debt. I would have expected that the reasonable thing to do is to use the 5,000 naira to reduce the debt burden I'm going to go with to maybe 8,000 naira, so that I am in a more comfortable position, a more decent position, versus simply increasing my expenditure and keeping my debt burden the same. Now, with all fairness to the managers of the economy, they see a lot more than we see. But I'm only looking at it from a layman's standpoint, and from the standpoint of the fact that if my grandmother was to take this decision with her small business, is this how she's going to take it? Because at the end of the day, whether you make it a fancy academic exercise or you make it a reality check discussion, the impact is going to be felt. So this additional expenditure, by what measure is the impact going to be directly proportional to the investments in the lives of Nigerians? We should be running away from debts now, because some of these debts have very varying terms. Some of them moratorium of 10 years and all. It's not today. We're going to be paying this for a long time, and the more we add to it, the more future we're chopping out of. And it's unfortunate that most of the people taking the decisions today will not be here 20 years from now. I'm not trying to be the devil's advocate, but that's a reality. If you're 60 years old today and you're taking this decision, in 20 years time you'll be in your 80s.
Okay.
Chances are very high that you're not going to be here.
Okay. All right. So now let's move away from that to certain other conversations. Let's come to the sector part of it. Defense, security. We know that we have some sort of security situation in Nigeria, and at times we hear it's getting better, then tomorrow you hear, another thing. Hopefully it's going to get better. And you see the sector receives the highest allocation. How would this in any way improve investor confidence and business operations? I'll start with you, Dr. Hamisu, then we'll get to you, Dr. Bashayi.
Well, thank you very much. You see, I want to say that investors' confidence is not based on the amount that is allocated to security. Investors' confidence has to do with people's commitment to securing the environment so that businesses can thrive. I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility. If you compare the budget of the people of Niger with the budget of Nigeria for security, you come to realize that the budget of the government of Niger is just a drop in an ocean. Yet, they are managing their security better than the way we are managing our security. I would say that patriotism and commitment to securing one's country has a lot to play. The kind of corruption and abuses that rock our security establishment in the past, you can't find it anywhere. Not in smaller countries like Niger, not smaller countries like Burkina Faso. So while I recognize the fact that security needed to be funded, I'm of the opinion that funding alone cannot translate to security on the ground so that investors can have confidence to come into this country. So we need to do more in terms of patriotism, in terms of actions, rather than the normal lame excuses of public servants that will always tell you lack of funds, inadequate equipment. then the question is, what do you do with the little that has been given? And let us not forget the fact that the fact that security is a very, very important business, and nations don't always audit it. It has become a conduit pipe for corruption, for abuse, for recklessness. And that is what has affected Nigeria. For me, when we had disciplined officers that are patriotic, that were ready to stake their lives for this country, we had exemplars of peace across the nation, and were able to attract investment from all over the world. When you compare that to the period where we now have politicians as security personnel who are interested in making more monies for themselves, we could see the consequences of that in the Northeast, Northwest, North Central, South, where government continued to pump money into security operations and little was achieved. So for me, beyond the amount that we needed to fight the insecurity, we also need to be patriotic and then do the needful so that we can be able to compete. Because today is a competition all over the world. Every country is competing for attention. So if China could guarantee security for investment, why would the entire world move to China? Okay. United Arab Emirates was able to guarantee security for people's investment, and the whole world moved to United Arab Emirates. Why can't Nigeria do the same thing? Okay. Considering our population, which is an asset, and the resources that we have in this country.
Okay, Dr. Bashayi, do you have any take on the security allocation?
Yes. So when you want to link security to business, it's not just the physical security, the financial security also comes in. Because for a businessman, it's a combination of the two. Okay. So while we're investing a whole lot more in physical security, where Nigerians will also be wondering whether or not they are getting the right level of sleep at night because they feel more secured, the investor is also thinking about the security of his funds. So physical policies now come in. Let me tell you, one of the key drivers of inflation is food inflation. And food inflation is driven by insecurity. Because the farmer is not able to farm, he's not secure enough to do his farm. And then the cost of bringing goods and services and bringing his farm produce from the farm, this is where he's going to sell them and make money, is also a nightmare. So that increases the cost of. I can give you an example. And bring a bag of oranges from Benue State, for example. You could buy a bag for about 10,000 naira, but then it's going to land you in Abuja. You're going to land that product in Abuja for over 20,000 naira. Now, what business sense does that make for a farmer to move more than double, almost the same amount, the same value of his product into transportation to bring it to town? Because energy is a huge cost. The cost of fuel, the cost of getting it to where it's going to eventually be sold. So these are all indices that the investor will look at. The cost of doing business, all the parameters from energy to security to the peace that he enjoys within the business environment are all factors going to put it. Okay. While we're spending so much money on physical structure, physical is security, we also need to pay equal attention to the other aspects of security that the investor considers when he's coming to invest in our country.
Okay. All right. So we'll because of time, we would have gone into the education and health sectors too, but for lack of time, let's now go to the implementation and monitoring. That's what we're going to be rounding up the conversation today. What mechanisms do you think the government needs to put in place to effectively implement this budget and avoid corruption? Dr. Hamisu.
Well, it's a combination of factors. As we said, one is to patriotically fight insecurity. Because what I've seen over the years is to use the Nigerian problem as justification to remove money from the coffers of government and siphon these monies, leaving the problem unsolved, and then the monies will not be there. And that is why we find ourselves in debt, servicing all of
Dr. Hamisu? So, Dr. Bashayi, since I think Dr. Hamisu has a small network challenge, you could speak on it?
Deficit, war.
Okay, welcome back.
I'm talking about proactive anti-corruption war, not reactive anti-corruption war. In addition to the fight against insecurity, then there should be investment in infrastructure. Look, the only day they will convince me in this country that we are serious is when I see a budget that is talking about reforms, a reform of the educational sector to ensure that we are looking for market-demanded courses that can transform our nation, that we can export the competencies that are coming from there. And then lastly, there should be monitoring and evaluation. I'm not talking about the monitoring and evaluation that chronicle how many shares did we buy. No, I'm talking about monitoring and evaluation that will take into account the entire budget exercise. What we do in Nigeria is we bring out the old budget of last year, and then we change the nomenclature, and then we add some few things to it, and then we add figures to it. There was a time in this country we were doing a research for one of the international donor organizations, and it requires us to get budget review reports. Okay. By the time we got to Ministry of Finance, we got for some years, we did not get for some years. And we felt that it was deliberate because of the politics of reviewing prices for contract and so on and so forth. They don't want to give us trend analysis. So all of these are germane to ensuring that budget perform and that people learn a lesson from the previous implementation of the budget. All of these are not done in Nigeria. We just simply add more money to some sectors, reduce for some sectors based on our whims and caprices, not what research has shown. So our budget should be more scientific and not research-based to the extent that it is people-oriented and is transformative.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hamisu. Dr. Bashayi, just in a few seconds, just your take.
So my take would be having a very strategic approach how we manage and track our budgets. For me, with my experience in the private sector, there is this cliche that this slogan will always say that if you don't track it, you cannot attract it. If you don't track it, you can't get it. Whatever you don't track, you don't get. Now, where we don't track our budgets, if I ask you today, what was the performance of the 2024 budget? I'm not sure there's any public document that clearly calls out this was what was budgeted for, this was what was achieved, and these are the indices. So we are already implementing another 2025 budget, and the cycle goes on and on. Now, what I would propose is a multi-sectoral approach to this, where you have a combination of both the private sector and the public sector reviewing and tracking our budgets, where we have a mid-year review of how we have performed in our budget cycle. What are we doing well and what are we not doing well? What do we need to change midway as we approach the second half of the year? These are the kind of things I will expect. And I wouldn't say the National Assembly to do that, because the National Assembly is also a participant in the budget. They have the powers to also add line items to the budget when it's presented by the executive. So I will expect it to be more like an independent body that is saddled with the responsibility of managing and monitoring all the spendings that have been done by MDAs and everybody that has been saddled with one line item or the other of the budget, and then reporting to the public. And then we can have public hearings and discuss the matters. So you may have, they approve this amount of money for you to run your budget for this year. How have you done midway? What does it look like till the end of the year? Does it look like from your performance you're doing well, you will need more money, or from the performance that we can see you don't even need more money? Even the one that has been approved needs to be taken from you to be given to another sector. These are the kind of active measures we need to put in place. But trust me, until we do something differently about the way we track our budget and manage our finances in this country, nothing is going to change. Every year is going to be the same rhetorics. Come and discuss this, give this amount of money to this, move. Next year we are doing the same thing. Nothing is likely going to change. Until we change the way and manner we track the performance of the budget, nothing is likely going to change.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel Bashayi and Dr. Abu Hamisu. It's been Abu Hamisu rather. It's been very insightful having you on Business Daily today, giving us your insights and takes on the 2025 budget. There's so much to unpack, but for lack of time, we'll not be able to go further. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And that was our guest on the show. They've done some justice to the conversation of the 2025 budget. That's as much we have for you today on Business Daily on Trust TV. Same time, same place tomorrow. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream for more news, programs, and documentary. I am Chiamaka Nwafor. Bye for now.